So in this latest video looking at decimals, we'll be focusing on multiplying and dividing by 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, etc., also known as the powers of 10. Now, one of the biggest mistakes is thinking that when you multiply by powers of 10, that you add the same number of zeros at the end, and when you divide, you add the same number of zeros at the front. Now, the key thing is that this only works when multiplying and dividing by single digits by powers of 10. And what I mean by powers of 10 are 10, 100,000, 10,000, 100,000, etc. So it's really, really important that you don't get into the routine of applying a method that only works for certain questions. So let's have a look at what I mean by that. So for example, when we have 2 times 1,000, that represents 2,000, which kind of makes sense because you've got 3 zeros in 1,000, so I add 3 zeros. Now here I've got 4 times 100,000, and again I've got 5 zeros, so the answer, I've got 5 zeros. Now when I'm dividing, I've got 1 0, so here I'm dividing 5 divided by 10, and so I've got 1 0 in 10, so I add a 0 at the end, and it then becomes 0.5. In the next one, I've got 7 divided by 1,000, and in 1,000 I've got 3 zeros, so if I add 3 zeros in front of the 7, I get the correct answer. And then with 12 divided by 1,000, here I've got 3 zeros, and the final answer I get 12,000, which also has 3 zeros. So each of these questions are absolutely correct. However, where this method then flaws is when you've got more than one digit that you are either multiplying or dividing by powers of 10. So for example here, I've got 12 divided by 1,000, and the correct answer is 0.012 with 2 zeros. So as you can see, I've got 1, 2. Not 1, 2, 3 zeros. So that's where this method is flawed. So this answer is correct. However, this answer here is incorrect. Now, a much better method of multiplying and dividing by 1,000 is remembering the following. So the key method is when you are multiplying and dividing by powers of 10, so 10, 100, thousands, etc. What you're actually doing is moving the decimal point by the number of zeros. So even though we don't write whole numbers with their decimal point is always at the end, like a full stop at the end of a sentence. So for example, if I had the number 23, then I don't add the decimal point, but the decimal point is right at the end. If I had 173, then the decimal point would go at the end. If I had 8,464, again, the decimal point would go at the end. So if you don't see a decimal point in a number, just assume that it's always at the end, and therefore it will be a whole number. So let me just get rid of all of that. And so the key thing that we need to learn is this. Okay, so when multiplying by powers of 10, then what you're actually doing is you're going to move the decimal point to the right, making the number bigger. And when you're dividing by powers of 10, you move the decimal point to the left, making the number smaller. And again, the number of places refers to how many zeros there are from what you are multiplying or dividing by. So if that makes absolutely zero sense, excuse the pun, let's have a look at some examples. So with question 1 here, we've got 5 times 1,000. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of color code these questions. So with question 1, I've got 5. And so my decimal point is here. And I'm going to move the decimal point 3 places because I've got 3 zeros. So I've got 1, 2, 3. So my decimal point is now going to go here. And what I do is I fill all these empty loops with zeros, giving me a final answer of 5,000. With number 2, again, let's just go through different colors. Let's go for blue. So with number 2, I've got 62, and I'm going to move the decimal point. Now I'm multiplying because I'm moving it to the right, and I'm moving it 4 places. So again, the decimal point is here, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And if your loops are big enough, you should be able to squeeze some zeros in, giving me a final answer of 620,000. And there's my final answer for that one. And I get a different color pen. Let's go for yellow. So here I've got 2.6. Now with 2.6, I have a decimal point. So I'm going to write 2.6. And here I'm moving it to the right 2 places because I've got 2 zeros. So here here's my decimal point. So that's 1, 2. So my decimal point is now going to go here, giving me a final answer of 260. Now what I'd recommend that you do is when you are doing your loops, you don't want to have 2 decimal points in a number. So if you just start your loop there, And so it kind of takes and physically moves that decimal point by the number of places. And let's move on to the next question. So let's go for green. So here we've got 12.368. And again, I'm moving the decimal point one place to the right because I've got 1 0. So here's my decimal point. So I'm going to move the decimal point one place. So it's going to become here. And so my final answer is 123.68. And there's my final answer. Now, again, I would strongly recommend try not to leave these as your final answer. I would always write it out neatly, because what you don't want to do is have 2 decimal points in your final answer, because then that would be massively mathematically incorrect. So moving on to the last one. So here we've got a number less than 1. So here we've got 0.0254. And again, I'm moving the decimal point to the right 3 places because I've got 3 zeros. So here's my decimal points. So that's 1, 2, 3. So the decimal point is going to go between the 5 and the 4, giving me a final answer of 0. Or actually, it's not. It's going to give me 25.4. And there is my final answer. Now, if you were to write it as 0025.4, then technically that's still correct. But again, if you've got zeros at the front, you just ignore them. And I certainly wouldn't scribble them out like that, but that would be the correct answer. Let's just get rid of that. Right, so let's have a look at dividing. So with these questions here, now there's a few more than the multiplying ones. We're going to do exactly the same. So again, remember that when we're dividing, we're going to move the decimal point to the left by the number of zeros. So here in the first question, we've got 8 divided by 1,000. So I'm going to move the decimal point 3 places to the left by 3 places. So with question 6, I've got, let's just underline so you know what colour it is. So here I've got 8. Now, because I'm going to move the decimal point, I'm going to leave a bit of space. Now, the decimal point is here in 8, and I'm moving it 3 places. That's 1, 2, 3. So the decimal point is going to go here, and I fill in the empty spaces with zeros, and also add a 0 in front of the decimal point. So the answer to this is going to be 0.008, and there is my final answer. With question 7, so here I've got 59. And again, I'm just not left a bit of space, so let me just fill out a bit of space here. And my decimal point is here, and I'm moving it to the left by 1 place because I've got 1 0. So again, I'm going to move it 1 place, so it becomes 5.9. And then with question 8, again, I've got 1, 2, 6, 8, and I'm moving it to the left by 4 places because I've got 4 zeros. So again, my decimal point is at the end because I can't see one. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the answer is going to be 0.1, I should say, 268. And there is my final answer. And then with question 9, again, moving it to the left by 2 places. Now, with question 9, I've already got a decimal point. So here I'm going to write 0.2. So I'm going to move it 2 places. That's 1, 2. So my decimal point is going to go here, fill in the empty spaces with zeros, and I've got 0.002. And there we go. And then for question 10, let me just underline that in green. So with question 10, again, moving it to the left by 3 places. So with question 10, I've got 1.235. And again, here I've got a decimal point. So that's 1, 2, 3. So the decimal point goes there. I'm going to fill in the empty spaces with zeros, or the empty loops, I should say. So I've got 0.001235. And there we go. And then with question 11, again, moving the decimal point 1 place to the left. And so I've got 0.0257, moving the decimal point 1 place, so it becomes here. And so the final answer is going to be 0.00257. And there's that. And then finally, for the last one, we've got, we're moving to the left 2 places. So I've got 0.00005. And so the decimal point is going to get moved 2 places. That's 1, 2. And again, filling the empty spaces. Now, a common question I always get asked when I'm teaching this is, what happens if I forget to write the 0 at the front? Like, could I leave the answer, for example, in question 8, would I get full marks if I left the answer as 0.1268? Now, technically, yes, but I would strongly urge you that if you haven't got a number in front of the decimal point, just stick a 0 there. But yeah, in theory, when we're reading it out, we always say 0.02. We don't say 0 point. We could sometimes get away with saying 0.1268. But when you're writing it down, always try and remember to stick a 0 in front of the decimal point if there is no number in front of it, or on the left of it, I should say. So let's have a look at a worded problem here. Now this one's quite a tricky one and doesn't automatically incorporate just multiplying and divided by decimals. It may involve a little bit of algebra. Let's go through it. So it says 3 friends win a lottery syndicate. So basically they've grouped together and to buy a ticket or a series of tickets, and they've decided to share it. And they decide to share the amount based on how much they contributed. So for example, one person might have bought, so what they decided, 3 friends have thought, right, you know what, if we win the lottery, let's share the amount. And one person has bought more tickets than another person, and that they've bought more tickets than another, and they've decided to share the winnings based on how much they've put in. So here we've got 3 people, and it says that Arsenal receives 10 times more than Layla, Kelsey receives 100 times less than Layla, and if Layla receives 270,000 less than Arsenal, work out how much each person gets. Now, you might be thinking, this seems really, really confusing. Well, let's have a look and try and break this problem down to make it easier for us to work with. Now, for starters, what I would strongly recommend that you do is try and abbreviate in terms of how we're going to label these people. So we're going to label them A, K, and L. Now, if we start in terms of working this out, so here we've got A, and then we've got L, and then we've got K. So let's have a look and break down what this problem actually is. So it says that the first line says that Arsenal receives 10 times more than Layla. Now, we don't know how much each person gets, so let's just, for argument's sake, say that Layla is X, because we don't know how much she receives. So we're just going to call it X. Now, we know that Arsenal receives 10 times more. So to get from here to here, what we've got to do is got to times by 10. And X times 10 is going to give me 10X. Now, it then says that Kelsey receives 100 times less than Layla. So what I then need to do is to get from Layla to Kelsey, I need to divide by 100. So X divided by 100 is going to be 0.01x. Because again, if you imagine that's 1 divided by 100 gives me 0.01, and that's where the 0.1x comes from. Now it then says that Layla receives £270,000 less than Arsenal. So that means that the difference between these two amounts is 270,000. Now, if I've not lost you already, so if we look at the difference between 1x and 10x, then that means that 200, let's just get a different color pen. So that means that 9x, which is the difference between Layla and Arsenal, is equal to 270,000. Add in a 0. So therefore, to work out what x is, I need to divide by 9, in which I get the answer of 30,000. So that means that x is 30,000. Now, if Layla is 1x, then that's going to be 1 times 30,000, which equals 30,000. Now, if Arsenal is, let me just write here now, is 10x, then that's going to be 10 times 30,000, which is going to be 300,000. And if Kelsey is 0.01x, then that's going to be 30,000 divided by 100, which is going to be going to be £300. And there is our final answer. Now, I will put some practice questions in the description below for you to practice everything you've learnt, and also I'll include the answers for you to check to make sure that you fully understand it.